G'day mate, 40 here. YouTube Premium just got an upgrade. I can now start watching videos at 4x, right, 4 times the speed. Very exciting. So do you know what the fundamental attribution error is? That's when you ascribe people's behavior to some fundamental quality of themselves, while your behavior, right, is often determined by the situation, right? When you are impatient, when you are harsh, when you are rude, while you're under pressure, right? There are excellent explanatory variables. But when other people are rude and impatient, well, that's just because that's who they are. And so right now on my feed, there's a lot of outrage about what a bunch of animals the people in Gaza are. But the people in Gaza are not inherently bad people, right? They are responding to a situation of great stress with Israel. And in a different context, right, the human potential, the human capital in Gaza could flourish and produce a beautiful society like Jordan, for example. Just waiting to see which lucky countries will get to tap that Gazan human capital. So there's a Substack writer I follow named Glenn. He writes The United States of Everything. And he made a post about Noah Smith, the Bloomberg columnist. He said, Noah Smith's a great writer and a terrible foreign policy analyst. And so one of the major intellectual developments in my life is recognizing that there is no connection between the beauty of someone's words and the profundity of their insights. Right? The glib, the rhetorically gifted, the euphonious, those who can write in a pleasing and exciting manner, not necessarily any more accurate than the dull and the boring and the plodding writer. I mean, take Frederick Matthias Alexander, for example, the bloke who developed the Alexander technique. By no means a great writer, but the Alexander technique is a fantastic technique, and he had some profound insights, even though his writing is quite plodding. So Noah Smith at Bloomberg, he seems to be embodying the conventional wisdom. Like he's trying to claim that Russia and China are the new axis of evil, and that Poland and a whole bunch of other countries need to get nuclear weapons now because China and Russia are engaged in massive acts of nuclear proliferation, right? It's absurd. Hello, YouTube land. So we are walking just outside of Beverly Hills on a beautiful sunny 70-degree Friday afternoon, 11:23 a.m. So reflecting on how Noah Smith, often a great writer, terrible analyst. Absolutely no connection between the beauty of people's words, the pleasing way that they can arrange phrases and sentences, the emotional and excitement quality of their work, right? There's no correspondence between that and clarity and wisdom. And so there's no evidence that China and Russia are trying to facilitate nuclear proliferation around the world. There's no evidence that China and Russia are forming some new axis of evil. And most importantly, there's absolutely no evidence that there's just something inherently evil about Russia or about China or about Israel or about Palestine. Right? People are the product of their circumstances, their genetics, their incentives, their early imprinting. And so under certain circumstances, all of us can be pretty evil. In other circumstances, almost all of us can be noble. Right? We all have a porous identity, meaning that we are profoundly affected by what goes on around us, right? In certain circumstances, you're going to be angry, you're going to be outraged, you're going to feel under pressure. The more pressure you feel, the more extreme your circumstances, the more you feel under threat, right? The more likely you are to lash out and to respond in some nasty way. Haven't seen any celebrities yet. I love California, so I am from Currumbong, which is outside Sydney in Australia. So I've lived about 14 years of my life in Australia, and I've lived about 40 years of my life in California. Lived 18 months in the United Kingdom. Lived 9 months in Orlando, Florida. And there you go, mate. Oh, and about 9 months in New Zealand. So, depending on where you stand, what your closest ties are, right, it's very easy to think that people who are different from you are evil, right? Whether they're the Russians, the Israelis, the Jews, the Christians, the Muslims, the blacks, the gays, whatever. People are just combo of their genetics, their circumstance, their imprinting, their incentives. And it's one of the most common mistakes of analysis, the fundamental attribution error, like attributing people's behavior to just some inherent trait in them. But we don't have an inherent moral character. We don't have inherent traits without regard for circumstance. So plenty of outgoing people are going to be introverted in certain circumstances, right? There are plenty of situations where the situation will be far more powerful in shaping your personality than whatever intrinsic qualities you think you have, right? People tend to behave a certain way in a church, in a mosque, in a synagogue, in a bar, right? At work, at a disco, right? At a national park. Right, if you're in a place of some kind of transcendent beauty, right, that's going to have a profound effect on you and on your personality. And so there's nothing inherently evil about Russia and China or Iran or the Palestinians. Right, people are just doing the best they can with the tools that they have at their disposal. But it's so tempting to write about people we don't know well as, you know, the greatest source of evil in the world and just possessing some inherent quality that can never be changed no matter the circumstances. So I love Donald Trump's more pragmatic approach to relationships, where he's willing to talk to anyone. Apparently he's flying to Russia to meet with Putin in May. I think that's great. Let's bring Putin back to the G7. Let's restore normal relations with Russia. Right? Putin didn't invade Ukraine because there's something inherently evil about him. Right? He invaded Ukraine because it was a pragmatic move, seeing NATO being extended up to his borders. Right? Ukraine had become a de facto member of NATO. Right? There are plenty of things that are true and yet are not officially true. Ukraine is not officially a member of NATO, but Ukraine has been operating as a de facto member of NATO for many years. Ukraine's armed forces have been trained by NATO. The war in Ukraine is not Russia versus Ukraine, it's Russia versus NATO. And you may have the status as an independent contractor, but you may in fact be an employee. Right? Just because something is not officially true doesn't mean it is not true. Right? De facto and de jure. De facto in all practical meaning, de jure according to the law. So, you may think, 40, you're this spiritual figure, you've transcended space and time. But no, right? There's a direction in my thinking. I'm affected by a circumstance, and all the great thinkers have been affected by the different situations they were in. So even if you believe that every word of the Bible was dictated by God, right, it is still dictated by God to man at a particular point in time that needed to use the language of man at that time in response to particular circumstances. And so there was language that was used, and there were narratives that were common at the time that the Bible developed that would profoundly affect the way that God transmits his will to man in the Bible. Or if you have the understanding that the Bible is the product of divine inspiration, but still the human beings who worked on it, right, they're operating at a particular point in time. And so they were people reacting to circumstances who had incentives, who had a message for a particular people in a particular situation, who were used to a particular worldview, who were used to particular narratives. And so no religion emerges straight out of the ground, right? No people emerge straight out of the ground, right? Every country is a product of a group of people moving to an area and eventually seizing control of it and defending it and then starting their own country, right? People don't emerge out of the ground. Religions don't emerge out of the ground, right? Religions develop on the narratives and pre-existing beliefs and rituals that were already there. Then they can get transformed in a new direction. So if you're an Orthodox Jew, right, you believe that God is behind this transformation and that God directed the transformation of all these pagan motifs and narratives and rituals and understanding about how nature worked and the seasons worked, and then it's transformed into this new transcendent holy monotheistic manner, but it still has to work with existing situations, existing incentives, existing people who are responding to, right, other people. And so the greatest thinkers, right, the greatest priests, ministers, rabbis, right, Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, a leading Orthodox Jewish scholar in the United States in the 20th century, right, there was a progress to his thought. As situations change, Reb Moshe Feinstein changed, right, as situations change, Donald Trump will change. Situations change, Vladimir Putin will change. As situations change, Hamas will change. Bibi Netanyahu will change. Right? People don't have this unchangeable inherent quality. Right? We're all different people in different circumstances. Can you run as fast as you can? I'm 58, bro. Oh man, so I'm watching White Lotus. It's set in Indonesia. And gosh, it looks gorgeous there. So White Lotus it's an understated show. It's like, it's not immediately compelling. It's not immediately funny. It's not immediately dramatic. If anything, it's immediately uncomfortable. It doesn't grab you by the throat and just immediately command your attention. But White Lotus season 3 set in Thailand, and it always begins with a murder. Then it has a bunch of Americans. This time they're all on some kind of spiritual quest as they move through Thailand. So I think it's fantastic that Trump is arriving as a kind of peace deal with Ukraine. And if Trump gets along better with Putin than Zelensky, it doesn't mean that Trump regards Putin as a better man than Zelensky. It's just that he finds Putin easier to deal with, right? We all have people who get on our nerves, even though they might otherwise be fine, upstanding people, right? Trump believes that he can arrive at a deal with Putin, and effectively Europe and Zelensky will have to lump it, because the strong take what they want and the weak endure what they must. The United States is strong, Europe and Ukraine are weak. And here we go. It'll be interesting to see if the situation blows up in Israel. They're expecting to get 6 more hostages back this weekend. A lot of unpredictability there. Okay. So can I run as fast as I can? I don't do a lot of running these days, right? 58, so the connective tissue isn't as flexible as it used to be. And due to the shape of my feet, I have to do these certain exercises for plantar fasciitis to keep the plantar in my feet strong. Because otherwise I've got feet that are shaped in a way to give me a lot of problems. And I spent thousands of dollars on physical therapy for my feet until I found an article in the 2014 New York Times giving me an exercise to do that really helps with the plantar fasciitis. So what you do is you stand on the curb and then you just kind of bounce up and down, but you really have to hold on to something. But so you just go up and down like this, and it just strengthens the plantar in your feet. Oh. But ideally, you hold on to something with your arm while you do it. So I love it when you discover an exercise that saves you thousands of dollars and months of pain. And you just do the damn exercise every day. So I love the Bob and Brad physical therapy exercises on YouTube. Whenever I've got an ache and a pain that I don't understand, right, there's usually some YouTube exercise or procedure that will take care of the problem. Bye bye, to quote Ariana Grande.